I bought this burqa in Afghanistan in 2001 when I was deployed there shortly after the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Burqas were plentiful, not only in the store that I was in, but also on every woman that was walking around in the streets that day. And it felt weird to hold one in my hand, knowing what they represented to the Afghan women who were forced to wear them during the reign of the Taliban. Now, there are women that wear this burqa by choice today because of religious or cultural beliefs, and that's not the burqa that I'm talking about. I'm specifically talking about the burqa that women were forced to wear against their will under the Taliban laws. So let me just paint this picture for you. The Taliban oppressed women. They believed that seeing the face of a woman was a source of corruption. They also believed that a woman's voice should not be allowed to be heard by a stranger. Women had to make sure that they didn't make any noise when they walked because it was against the law for their footsteps to be heard by a man. Women weren't allowed to be educated, and women were not allowed to work, but they were allowed to be beaten, whipped, flogged, publicly humiliated, and even executed. And it wasn't always like this. Before the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, the women lived more similar to how we do today. So just imagine if you had to take your daughter or your mother or your sister and subject them to these radical rules of oppression that the Taliban enforced. And if you are a woman, imagine having to wear this burqa everywhere you go. And not only do you need to make sure that the wrong people don't hear you speak or walk, but this garment also impairs your vision. The small mesh window on the front of the burqa is just wide enough to reach the outer corner of your eyes, and it completely blocks your peripheral vision. And that's done by design. So that if you wanted to look at anything that wasn't directly in front of you, you would have to turn your head in order to see it, which also allows everybody else to know exactly what you're looking at. So not only does this burqa control what the world can or cannot see of you, it also controls what you can see of the world. That's what the burqa during the Taliban reign represents to me. Now, earlier that day, I was in the streets of Kabul, Afghanistan, and I was standing there, and I was the only uncovered woman out there. And a crowd started to form around me, and people were just staring at me. And when that crowd got large enough to make me feel unsafe, I walked back very quickly to the car, the vehicle that transported me out there. And I got in, I shut the door, and I sat there, and this lone burqa walked up to my window. And I couldn't see the woman underneath, but she raised her hands up and she pasted them against my window. And she alternated between repeatedly knocking on my window and holding her hands out as if she were begging for something. Now, I bought this burqa in the store that day because of her. I would have bought all of the burqas in the entire town if I meant that I could have prevented another woman from being forced to wear one of them by the Taliban. But I knew that that didn't make sense and it wasn't a feasible plan. So I just settled for a few, and I took those to remind me of how cruel the world can be to its mothers and daughters and sisters. But I was inspired that day to do my part, to lift the burqa and to demolish it from the Taliban world. And I'm here now, knowing that we're not subject to the Taliban laws. And we don't wear physical burqas. But we've all experienced the metaphorical message that the burqa during the Taliban reign represents. The oppression and the subsequent depression of humanity. We've all, male or female, we've all experienced a depressing or an oppressive moment, whether it was self-inflicted or not. Whether it was that maybe you were too afraid to stand up for something, or somebody wasn't allowing you to stand, or whether you didn't feel qualified enough, or you didn't have the means to get qualified, or if you felt like or you feel like you're walking alone on this journey, or you're walking with others that don't genuinely care about you. That lady in the burqa, hands pasted against my window. After some time, she lowered her hands. And it was like she lost hope. And I felt this deep, dismal feeling in my chest. And then she did something that I'll never forget. She reached for the bottom of her burqa. And she lifted it up, pulled it up over her head. And she showed me her beautiful, warm, heartfelt face. And then she held her hands out again, as if she were begging for something. And I had specifically been instructed not to give anybody anything that day, so I had nothing to fill her hands with. And I looked at her, and I did the only thing that I could think to do at the time. I raised my hand, and I pressed it against the window. She looked at me, and she looked at my hand. She smiled briefly, a smile filled with a million words and a million emotions. And she raised her hand, and she met my hand at the window. And with hands pressed together, separated only by a thin sheet of glass, we experienced something that no material object could provide. We shared a moment of support for one another. We never touched, and we never spoke. And I don't know why or what she was doing that day. I was sent on a mission by my commander, but I know that what we left with was something far more powerful than anything that we had set out to get. We left with the support of another human being. I left with a newfound sense of comfort and hope. And I realized that this is what support feels like. This is how support from somebody else can lift that dark and dismal feeling within you. That lady in the burqa and I are from two totally different worlds, different environments, different circumstances, different goals, and different missions in life. But this was the same support, the same kindness and the same compassion, the same genuine love for one another, the same undying desire to see each of us succeed in each of our own journeys. A complete stranger in a strange land, yet a connection so powerful that it gives me shivers every time I think about it, even almost 20 years later. And this is my message, this is my wish for you today, that you experience that same kind of support, that you receive that support, and that even if you don't, that you're still willing to give that same support, that you share a moment with someone else, whether it's a stranger or not, that when you raise your hand, because it is the last thing left that you can do, that it's met with another loving and supporting hand. Thank you.